The movie starts with a young girl named Ellen saying her nightly prayers, calling out for a guardian angel's companionship. She is answered by a low, inhuman voice, telling her that she has awoken him from an eternal slumber. The voice draws her to her window, where a shadow can be seen through the blowing curtains. The voice asks if she will pledge herself to him forever. As she eerily floats above the floor, she agrees. Ellen then begins to have a seizure. Years later, Ellen is now married to a real estate agent, Thomas Hutter, and is living in the town of Wisborg. The two are deeply in love, and Thomas starts a new job working for his boss, Hernach. His boss, Hernach, tasks Thomas with selling an old castle belonging to the mysterious Count Orlok. So, Thomas is to travel to Bohemia to have Orlok sign the paperwork. He then goes home, and when Thomas tells Ellen about his impending trip to sell the castle, she becomes upset. She tells him about a dream she had on their wedding night, where all the guests had died, and she was met by death as her groom. However, she claims she had never felt happier than she'd ever been. Thomas comforts her as best he can, saying that once he returns from the trip, they will have some money and be able to buy a new home with a maidservant. But Ellen says they will not need any of that and tells him not to go on the trip. In the end, he manages to convince her and gets ready for the trip. Before leaving, Thomas brings Ellen to her best friend Anna's home, so she can stay there with Anna and her husband Friedrich. They have two little girls, Clara and Louise, and Anna is pregnant with a third child. It's a happy, bright home, all decorated for Christmas, and Thomas trusts that Ellen will be well cared for. The next day, Ellen and Thomas say their tearful goodbyes, promising to write to each other every day. Thomas leaves and arrives at a small village in Bohemia for the night. The locals shun him when they learn he has business involving the Count. Thomas asks if there's anywhere he can sleep for the night, but the locals refuse to help anyone associated with Count Orlok. Eventually, Thomas offers double the money, and an old woman takes pity on him and gives him a room. She takes him to the room and warns him not to leave because the shadow will trap him in a nightmare, and he won't be able to escape. At night, Thomas watches as the villagers carry a nude woman into the woods to a sarcophagus containing a creature, which they impale with a stake. Thomas wakes up in the morning thinking he dreamed it all, but then sees his feet are covered in mud and leaves. He also finds the village deserted, and even his horse is gone. Thomas continues the journey on foot until, at last, he sees a carriage coming toward him. It stops in front of him, with no driver and no one inside. He gets in, and the carriage takes him to the castle, where he finally meets Count Orlok, who mostly moves in darkness. Orlok orders Thomas to address him as Lord as he reads the paperwork to sell the castle. While Orlok is looking at the papers, he gives Thomas something to eat, but when Thomas tries to cut it, he accidentally cuts his thumb, which Orlok notices and tastes the blood. Orlok then sees Thomas's locket containing a picture of Ellen. Orlok smells lilac on it and recognizes her as the girl who pledged herself to him. He then keeps the locket. They both sign the paperwork, and when Thomas says he has to depart as the paperwork is done, Orlok tells him he must stay due to his poor health. Orlok claims Thomas is free to leave once he fully recovers. However, Orlok feeds on Thomas while he sleeps, ensuring he never truly recovers. That day, Thomas sees bite mark on his chest and starts to run around the castle, trying to find a way out. He finds the sarcophagus where Orlok sleeps, finally seeing the grotesque, undead creature he really is, with rats crawling on him. Thomas goes to kill him with a pickaxe, but Orlok wakes and sends his wolves chasing after him. Thomas crawls out onto a window ledge and, in desperation, makes the long jump into the river below. Meanwhile, Ellen's becoming more distressed as more time passes with no word from Thomas. She has seizures that are becoming more frequent, so Friedrich brings in Dr. Sievers to take care of her. He tries everything that modern medicine dictates, but nothing seems to work. Meanwhile, a group of locals find Thomas and take him to the nearby church to treat him. He stays until he has the strength to move and then leaves despite the locals' advice. Knowing that Count Orlok is after Ellen, he rushes home. Sievers goes to his mentor, Dr. Albin, an expert in the occult. They visit Hernach, who is institutionalized due to his madness. He has several headless pigeons near him before he takes a bite out of another, saying that his master, Orlok, is coming. Albin determines that Ellen is being controlled by Orlok, who is also known as Nosferatu, though Friedrich is skeptical of this. Albin later visits Ellen in her room, where she talks about being haunted by Orlok and his impending arrival, and how he has been haunting her mind and dreams since she was a child. She asks if evil comes from within or from beyond. Meanwhile, Count Orlok travels by ship to Wisborg, sleeping inside a crate filled with dirt from his home. When sailors begin disappearing or turning up dead, the crew believes the plague is to blame. They examine their cargo and open Orlok's crate, releasing a swarm of rats. Orlok kills the remaining crew before the ship crashes into the port. The rats escape the wreck and spread the plague throughout the town. As Thomas arrives home, Hanak escapes the hospital and speaks about Orlok's plan to return to the castle. Orlok insists he needs Ellen to willingly pledge herself to him again. He cannot take her by force. Meanwhile, Ellen asks to sleep at Anna's house, and the two talk about their long friendship. Anna gives her a necklace with a cross to hold on to. Later that night, Orlok appears to Ellen in her dreams. She tells him she knows he's a monster and vows never to be his. Orlok warns her she has 3 nights to reconsider her decision. If she refuses to pledge herself to him, he'll kill everyone she cares about and destroy the entire town. When Ellen wakes, she is horrified to find Anna on the floor, covered in rats and bite marks. As the plague spreads, Friedrich gets fed up with having to deal with both Ellen's problems and now Anna's sickness. He kicks Ellen and Thomas out, sending them back to their own house. Ellen and Thomas argue about everything, but it's clear to Thomas that Ellen is what Dr. Albin calls possessed. Orlok continues to try and get into Ellen's mind to push Thomas away, but she has him have Ruff make out with her in an act of defiance against the Count. Meanwhile, Anna hears her daughters screaming and runs into their room to find Orlok feeding on them. Then he attacks and kills Anna. After the funeral, a despondent Friedrich goes back to the crypt and opens Anna's coffin, kissing her and infecting himself with the plague. Dr. Sievers and Dr. Albin arrive too late to help them and burn their bodies. Ellen and Albin realize that the only way to truly be rid of Orlok is for her to be the one to willingly sacrifice herself. In order to distract Thomas, Albin has him and Sievers go with him to Orlok's castle, seemingly to kill him. They find the sarcophagus and stake the body inside, but it's not Orlok. It's Hanak, who says with his dying breaths that Orlok tricked him and that it's Ellen he really wants. Thomas leaves as Albin and Sievers set fire to the castle. Orlok comes to Ellen's room, where she disrobes and pledges herself to him. They lay together, and Orlok starts feeding on her. He goes to stop after a while, but Ellen keeps hold of him, telling him to keep feeding. Orlok loses track of time, and then suddenly, it's morning. As daylight spills into the room, Orlok screams as he shrivels and dies, blood pouring out of every orifice. Ellen holds him and lives just long enough to see Thomas when he gets there. Albin says that because of Ellen's sacrifice, the curse was lifted and the town was saved. In this way, movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more interesting movie recaps.